Have you ever had a moment where the floor just falls out from under you? 1 second you're standing on what you think is solid ground, and the next you're in a free fall with nothing to grab onto. For Clara, that moment didn't happen on a cliff edge or during a terrifying accident. It happened under the fluorescent lights of a doctor's office in front of a receptionist with pity in her eyes. It happened with the single soul-crushing phrase, "I'm sorry, ma'am. Your card has been declined." A simple inconvenience for most, but for her it was the declaration of a war she didn't even know had been waged, and the man who had just fired the first shot, her husband. The air in the penthouse was always the same, chilled to a precise 68 degrees and scented with a custom blend of white tea and fig that cost more per ounce than most people's groceries. It was the smell of wealth of curated perfection. From their 72nd floor perch, overlooking Central Park, New York City, was a silent, sparkling tapestry. A kingdom that Clara Becker Worthington was supposed to feel like a queen of. Instead, most days, she felt like its most well-kept prisoner. Her husband, Richard Worthington, CEO of the tech behemoth Nexus Dynamics, was a man who didn't just live his life. He architected it. Every detail was meticulously planned, from the thread count of their sheets to the exact shade of cream on the walls, a color he dubbed Monet's morning light. Their marriage was his masterpiece. On the surface, it was flawless. They were the golden couple of the New York tech and society scene. Richard, with his sharp Tom Ford suits, piercing blue eyes, and a smile that could disarm senators and secure billion-dollar deals, and Clara, the elegant, supportive wife, always dressed in the latest Oscar de la Renta or Carolina Herrera, her art history degree from Yale. A charming footnote to her primary role as Mrs. Worthington. Their photos were splashed across Vogue and Vanity Fair, pages laughing at the Met Gala, looking serious and philanthropic at the Worthington Foundation Gala, sailing off the coast of St. Bart's. Richard loved the image they projected. Power, stability, old money meets new tech. He often said, "Perception is reality, Clara. We give them the reality they want to see." But the reality Clara lived was one of quiet erosions, a slow, steady chipping away at her own identity, until she was little more than a beautiful, breathing accessory. It hadn't started that way. When she'd met Richard, she was a promising curator at a small but respected Chelsea gallery. She had a sharp eye, a passion for discovering new artists, and a life that was her own. Richard had been a whirlwind, a force of nature who saw her he'd claimed like no one else had. He'd loved her fire, her independence. He'd supported her work, attending her gallery openings and buying pieces from her featured artists. But after the wedding, the support slowly morphed into control, all under the guise of love and protection. "Darling, why stress yourself with the gallery? You don't need to work," he'd murmured one night, massaging her shoulders as she pored over invoices. "Let me take care of you. I want to give you the world." The world, it turned out, meant giving up her job. Then it meant letting his financial team handle her trivial finances. "It's just more efficient, sweetheart. Everything in one place. No need for you to worry your pretty head about it." She was given a credit card, an exclusive black steel card linked to his primary account. At first, it felt like freedom. Unlimited funds. No need to check a balance. But she soon learned it was a leash. Every purchase, from a coffee to a couture gown, was logged and itemized in a monthly report that his personal assistant reviewed. More than once, Richard had casually brought up a purchase in conversation, Did you enjoy that lunch at Perse with Isabella? The truffle risotto must have been divine, judging by the bill. The message was clear. I am always watching. Her friends had dwindled, not because he forbade her from seeing them, but because he made it subtly difficult. Her old art world friends were a bit scruffy for their new social circle. Her college friends were provincial. Her best friend, Isabella Rossi, a razor-sharp corporate lawyer, was the only one who saw through the facade. He's building a cage, Clara Isabella had warned her over lunch a year ago, her voice low. It's a beautiful gilded cage, but it's still a cage. Do you even have your own bank account anymore? Clara had flushed with defensiveness. Richard takes care of everything. It's easier that way. Isabella had just shaken her head, her dark eyes filled with concern. It's never easier to give up your power, honey. It's just easier for him. Now Clara was living the truth of Isabella's words. The silence in their marriage had grown cavernous. Richard was consumed with the launch of Nexus Dynamics' new flagship product, Aura, a revolutionary AI-driven home integration system. He spent weeks in Palo Alto, leaving Clara alone in the silent fig-scented penthouse. The loneliness was a physical ache, a hollowness that no amount of shopping or charity work could fill, which brought her to today. The appointment. The topic of children had been a delicate, painful dance for the past 3 years. Richard wanted an heir, a successor to the Worthington Empire. It was the one piece of his architected life that was missing. He spoke of their future son. It was always a son, as if he were a foregone conclusion. But nature had not complied with Richard Worthington's 5-year plan. After a year of trying with no success, Richard had decreed they would see the best fertility specialist in the country, Dr. Lena Hansen. It was Clara who had to endure the endless tests, the hormonal injections, the invasive procedures. Richard was too busy, too important. He'd provided his sample with the detached efficiency of a man making a deposit at a bank and considered his part done. The pressure, the stress, the blame, all of it, landed squarely on Clara's shoulders. This morning's appointment was a follow-up to her latest round of tests. The air between them at breakfast had been thick with unspoken resentment. Richard had been scrolling through his tablet, his brow furrowed as he read the pre-market reports from the Tokyo Stock Exchange. "Do you have to go today?" he'd asked, not looking up. "I have back-to-back calls with the board. The Aura launch is critical." "Yes, Richard. It's the follow-up with Dr. Hansen. We discussed this," Clara said, her voice tighter than she intended. He finally looked at her, his blue eyes as cold and remote as a winter sky. "Just have her assistant send me the report. I'll have my team review it." "My team?" The word stung. This wasn't a business acquisition. It was their life. It was her body. "I think you should be there, and I think you're being overly emotional," he'd snapped, folding his napkin and placing it on the table. A signal that the conversation was over. "I'm building an empire, Clara. For us, for our future family. All I ask is a little support and a little less drama." He'd stood up, leaned down to kiss the air beside her cheek, and walked out without another word. The scent of his expensive cologne, a mix of sandalwood and entitlement, lingered long after he was gone. Now sitting in the back of the chauffeured Maybach as it purred through Manhattan traffic, Clara felt a familiar knot of dread tighten in her stomach. The car was another of Richard's gifts. She hadn't driven herself in years. He'd insisted on a driver for safety and convenience. She knew it was for control. She couldn't just go wherever she wanted. Every trip was logged, every destination known. She clutched her Hermes clutch, the smooth leather, doing little to soothe her frayed nerves. Inside was the black card, her lifeline, her leash. The appointment with Dr. Hansen wasn't just about fertility anymore. It was about her health. The stress of her life with Richard was taking a physical toll. She'd been having dizzy spells and heart palpitations. She hadn't told Richard. He would have dismissed it as more of her drama. The Maybach pulled up to the curb in front of a discreet, elegant brownstone on the Upper East Side that housed Dr. Hansen's private practice. "I will be back in 1 hour, Robert," she told the driver, trying to sound confident. "Yes, Mrs. Worthington." As she walked toward the heavy oak doors, she felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. She was walking into a consultation about creating a new life, but she felt as if her own was slipping away, bit by bit, purchase by purchase, dismissal by dismissal. She was living in a gilded cage, and she was beginning to fear the doors had been locked for good. Dr. Hansen's office was the antithesis of Clara's penthouse. It was warm and inviting with soft lighting, plush armchairs, and walls adorned with vibrant, hopeful art pieces Clara recognized from up-and-coming artists she would have once championed. Dr. Hansen herself was a woman in her late 50s with kind, intelligent eyes and a calming presence. She didn't treat Clara like the wife of a billionaire. She treated her like a person. "Clara." "It's good to see you," she said, gesturing for her to sit. "Though I wish Richard could have joined us. The new product launch is all-consuming," Clara replied, the excuse tasting like ash in her mouth. Dr. Hansen gave a knowing, gentle nod. "Of course. Well, let's go over your results." She pulled up a file on her computer screen, her expression turning serious. "Physically, you are in perfect health. All your levels are normal. But I want to talk about something else. Your cortisol levels." She turned the screen toward Clara. It was a chart with a jagged red line that was alarmingly high. Cortisol is the body's primary stress hormone. In a healthy person, it fluctuates. Yours are chronically elevated. This is the kind of level I see in first responders or people in active combat zones. "Clara, what's going on in your life?" The question was so direct, so compassionate, that it shattered Clara's carefully constructed composure. The tears she had been holding back for months, for years, began to well up. I don't know," she stammered, hating the weakness in her voice. "Everything is supposed to be perfect." "Supposed to be?" Dr. Hansen probed gently. Chronic stress can have a significant impact on fertility. It can disrupt hormone regulation and create an environment that is inhospitable to conception. Forget the injections and the procedures for a moment. I'm more concerned about you, Clara. Your well-being. This level of stress is not sustainable. It's a tremendous burden on your heart, your immune system, on your entire body. They talked for nearly an hour. For the first time, Clara spoke honestly about the crushing loneliness, the constant feeling of being watched and managed, the subtle ways Richard made her feel small and inconsequential. She didn't paint him as a monster, but as a man so obsessed with control that he was suffocating her. Dr. Hansen listened without judgment, offering not platitudes but real medical concern. "Clara," she said finally, her tone firm but kind, "we can continue with the treatments, but I strongly advise you to seek therapy for yourself. You need an outlet. You need to address this stress at its source. A baby isn't a solution to an unhappy environment. It's a life that deserves to enter a peaceful one." Walking out of the consultation room, Clara felt strangely lighter, as if a great pressure had been momentarily lifted. Someone saw her. Someone understood. The validation was a balm on her raw nerves. She felt a flicker of her old self, the competent, confident woman who could handle anything. She approached the polished mahogany reception desk. A pleasant young woman smiled at her. "That will be $5,200 for today's consultation and lab work, Mrs. Worthington. A routine transaction." Clara opened her clutch, pulled out the heavy black steel card, and handed it over. She'd used it for purchases 10 times that amount, without a second thought. The receptionist swiped it. A soft beep. She frowned and swiped it again. Another beep. A flush began to creep up Clara's neck. "I'm sorry," the receptionist said, her professional smile faltering. "It's not going through. Do you have another form of payment?" "That's impossible," Clara said, her voice a little too loud. "Try it again. The chip, maybe." The woman tried the chip. The small screen on the terminal flashed red. Card declined. Contact issuer. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through Clara's brief moment of clarity. This had never happened before. Never. There must be some mistake, she insisted, her heart starting to pound against her ribs in a frantic rhythm. It's an unlimited card. The receptionist's eyes were wide with a mixture of confusion and pity, the exact look Clara dreaded most. A woman in a Chanel suit in the waiting area glanced over, her curiosity piqued. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot wave that washed over Clara's face. "I'm really sorry, Mrs. Worthington," the receptionist whispered, leaning forward. "It says the account holder has suspended the card." The account holder. Richard. The world tilted on its axis. He'd done this. He had deliberately, coldly cut her off. On the day of her fertility appointment. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. It wasn't an accident. It was a message. A punishment for the argument that morning, for daring to ask for his presence, for being an emotional inconvenience while he was building his empire. Her hands trembled as she fumbled in her clutch for her phone. She didn't have another card. She didn't have cash. Richard had called carrying large amounts of cash. Vulgar. The black card was all she had. It was all he allowed her to have. She found his name in her contacts and pressed the call button. It rang once, twice, a third time. She could picture him in his glass-walled office, seeing her name on his screen and deliberately ignoring it. Finally, he picked up. "Clara, I'm in a meeting." His voice was clipped impatient. "Richard, my card was declined," she said, her voice a strained whisper. "Here at Dr. Hansen's. They said you suspended it." There was a beat of silence on the other end of the line. It wasn't a silence of confusion. It was a silence of confirmation. It was the silence of power. "Did I?" he said, his voice smooth and utterly devoid of warmth. "Strange. Perhaps you should be more careful with your spending, Clara. Things are tight with the Aura launch. Every penny counts." It was the most ludicrous lie she had ever heard. Nexus Dynamics was worth over $500 billion. Tight was not a word in Richard Worthington's vocabulary. This was purely sadistically about putting her in her place. "Richard, please," she begged the word, tasting like poison. "I'm at the reception desk. This is humiliating." "Well," he said, and she could almost hear the cruel smirk in his voice. "Perhaps it's a valuable lesson in fiscal responsibility. I have to go. We'll discuss it when I get back from Palo Alto." The line went dead. She stood there, phone in her hand, the dial tone buzzing in her ear. The receptionist was looking at her, her face a mask of professional sympathy. The woman in the Chanel suit was now openly staring. Clara felt naked, exposed, stripped bare in the most brutal way imaginable. He hadn't just blocked a card. He had announced to the world, or at least this small, exclusive corner of it, that she was nothing. She had no money, no power, no agency of her own. She was entirely dependent on his whim, and he had just shown her how easily he could turn it off. Just as the full, crushing weight of it was about to bring her to her knees, Dr. Hansen emerged from her office, having heard the commotion. She took in the scene in an instant, Clara's white face, the receptionist's distress. "Is there a problem?" she asked, her calm voice cutting through the tension. Her card was declined," the receptionist stammered. Clara wanted the floor to swallow her whole. But Dr. Hansen simply walked to the desk, put a reassuring hand on Clara's arm, and spoke to the receptionist. "It's fine, Sarah. Send the invoice to my personal accounting. We'll sort it out later." She then turned to Clara, her eyes full of a deep, sorrowful understanding. "Clara, let me call you a cab." "My driver," Clara started to say, then stopped. The driver worked for Richard. Taking the Maybach would be another form of capitulation, another acceptance of his control. "No," Clara said, a new, unfamiliar strength hardening her voice. "A cab would be wonderful, thank you." The ride home in a rattling yellow taxi, a vehicle she hadn't been in for a decade, was a study in contrasts. Outside, the city bustled with life, people hurrying along the sidewalks, living their own independent lives. Inside, Clara felt like a ghost. The humiliation at the clinic had burned away the last vestiges of her denial. This wasn't a partnership. It was a dictatorship. The gilded cage was real, and the door had just been slammed shut and locked. But as the taxi crossed 59th Street, something else began to burn alongside the shame rage. A cold, clear, incandescent rage. Richard wanted to teach her a lesson. Fine. She was about to teach him one, too. When Clara walked into the silent, scent-controlled penthouse, it felt alien, like a museum of a life that was no longer hers. The floor-to-ceiling windows that once seemed to offer a view of the world now felt like the glass walls of a fishbowl. She walked past the abstract paintings Richard had chosen, the sterile designer furniture, and the framed photos of their perfect life. In every photo she was smiling, but now all she could see was the hostage-like quality in her eyes. She didn't cry. The tears had been cauterized by the white-hot fury that was now coursing through her veins. He thought he could humiliate her, strip her of her dignity, and leave her powerless. He thought she would just sit here in their perfect prison, waiting for him to return from Palo Alto and benevolently restore her privileges. He had fundamentally misunderstood the woman he had married, the woman he had tried so hard to erase. He had forgotten she had a voice. Her first and only call was to Isabella. "Izzy," she said, her voice eerily calm. "Can you come over? Something's happened." Isabella, who could read Clara's moods better than anyone, detected the steel beneath the quiet. "On my way. Don't do anything until I get there." An hour later, Isabella blew into the penthouse like a hurricane of righteous indignation. She wore a sharp black power suit and an expression that could curdle milk. She'd already cancelled 3 client meetings. Clara recounted the entire day, from the conversation with Dr. Hansen about her stress levels to the final brutal phone call with Richard. She spoke without emotion, her voice flat and precise, laying out the facts as if she were a witness describing a crime. Which in a way she was. When she finished, Isabella was silent for a full minute, her jaw tight. That sociopathic son of a bitch. She finally breathed, her voice low and dangerous. This isn't just cruel, Clara. This is calculated. This is coercive control. It's a classic textbook tactic of abuse. He's isolating you, controlling your access to resources. He did this to break you. I know, Clara said simply. Okay. Isabella went into lawyer mode, pacing the vast living room. Okay, we have options. We file for divorce. We get a forensic accountant to go through his finances. We can prove financial abuse. It will be messy, it will be public, and he will fight dirty. He'll use his PR machine to paint you as an unstable gold-digging shrew. Clara shook her head. He controls the narrative, Izzy. He always has. His team will leak stories. They'll twist everything. I'll be the crazy wife of the beloved tech genius. No one will believe me. So what do we do? Isabella asked, stopping in front of her. What do you want to do? Clara looked up, and for the first time that day, Isabella saw a fire in her eyes she hadn't seen since before Richard. It was the look of the old Clara, the gallery curator, who could spot a masterpiece in a dusty pile of canvases. I want to tell the truth, Clara said. But I want to tell it my way, before he can twist it, before his PR team can spin it. I want to burn his narrative to the ground. A slow smile spread across Isabella's face. You want to get ahead of him. You want to set the battlefield. I want to blow it up, Clara corrected. He built his entire empire on a carefully crafted image of benevolence and integrity. A family man, a visionary. His company Nexus Dynamics sells Aura, a system that's all about trust and integration into the home. What happens when the world finds out that the man selling them a key to their perfect home uses his own to lock his wife in a cage? Isabella's smile widened. Oh, this is good. This is very, very good. So how do we do it? A tell-all with the New York Times? No, Clara said immediately. They'll filter it, edit it, frame it their way. This needs to be my voice. Unfiltered, unedited, raw. She walked over to her laptop, a sleek device Richard had bought her. She opened it, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. I used to have a blog, years ago, before Richard. It was called The Gilded Frame. I wrote about art life, finding beauty in unexpected places. I haven't touched it in years, but I still own the domain. Clara, are you sure? Isabella asked, her voice turning serious. Once you do this, there's no going back. You will detonate a bomb in the middle of your life. And his. My life was detonated this morning at a reception desk on the Upper East Side. Clara said, her voice ringing with newfound clarity. This is just me picking up the trigger. For the next 4 hours, the penthouse became a war room. Isabella ordered Thai food, while Clara wrote. The words poured out of her a torrent of truth that had been dammed up for a decade. She wrote with a precision and eloquence that came from years of suppressed intelligence. She didn't rant. She didn't sling mud. She simply told her story. She started with the scene at the doctor's office, describing the clinical details the receptionist's pity, the cold finality of the words, card suspended. She named the clinic, she named the doctor, not to implicate them, but to ground the story in undeniable fact. Then she pulled back the curtain on their marriage. She wrote about giving up her career, about the slow, insidious transfer of her financial independence. She detailed the casual remarks about her, spending the way he used the black card as both a reward and a leash. She wrote about the loneliness, the isolation, the constant pressure to be perfect. She wrote about the fertility treatments, her body being poked and prodded for an heir to an empire she had no stake in. She was careful and deliberate. She used his own language, his corporate speak, against him. She called his actions a hostile takeover of her life. She referred to his control as a feature, not a bug, of their marriage. She was leveraging his own brand against him. Isabella, reading over her shoulder, acted as a legal and strategic editor. Good use, that phrase, coercive control. It has a legal weight, she'd say. Or, don't just say he was dismissive, give the exact quote. A little less drama, Clara. Perfect. It makes him sound like a condescending prick. The final piece was a masterstroke of narrative warfare. Clara titled it simply, "My husband is Richard Worthington. Yesterday, he blocked my card at my fertility appointment." The title was a heat-seeking missile aimed directly at the heart of his public image. It was specific, shocking, and impossible to ignore. As she attached a photo to the post, not one of the glossy Vanity Fair shots, but a candid photo a friend had taken years ago of her in her old gallery, laughing, her face vibrant and full of life, a stark contrast to the hollowed-out socialite she had become. A wave of fear washed over her. This was it, the point of no return. "Are you ready?" Isabella asked softly, her hand on Clara's shoulder. Clara took a deep, shuddering breath. She thought of the woman in the Chanel suit. She thought of Dr. Hansen's kind eyes. She thought of Richard's cold, smug voice on the phone. She thought of the life she had lost and the woman she had almost forgotten. "Yes," she said. Her finger hovered over the mouse. She looked at Isabella, who gave her a firm, determined nod. Click. The post was live. For a moment, there was only silence in the vast, empty penthouse. Then Isabella's phone buzzed, and again, and again. She had shared the link on her private social media. Clara closed the laptop. She didn't want to watch the numbers, the shares, the comments. Not yet. She walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows and looked out at the city lights. They didn't look like a sparkling tapestry anymore. They looked like a million possibilities, a million different lives. For the first time in a decade, she felt like one of them could be hers. The cage door was open. She had just set fire to the cage itself. The internet does not sleep, and it does not forgive. Clara's post didn't just make a splash. It was a digital tsunami. It started as these things do, in small, concentrated ripples. Isabella's network of powerful female lawyers and executives in New York saw it first. They were women who understood the subtleties of power misogyny and the gilded cages that still existed even in the 21st century. They shared it with fury, adding their own commentary. This is what coercive control looks like. I've seen this happen to friends. Bravo for her courage. Within an hour, the ripples hit the tech world. A journalist from TechCrunch, known for her sharp critiques of Silicon Valley's toxic bro culture, posted the link on X, formerly Twitter. Her post went viral. The carefully curated image of Nexus Dynamics CEO Richard Worthington is taking a major hit tonight. And it's coming from inside the house. By midnight, Clara's story was the #1 trending topic in the United States. Stand with Clara was born, and it was a wildfire. Clara and Isabella watched, huddled on the white sofa that Richard had picked out a laptop open between them. They were no longer in the penthouse. They were in the eye of a hurricane they had summoned. Clara's blog. A dormant site that had previously received maybe a dozen hits a month had crashed twice from the traffic. Isabella had to call a web developer friend in a panic to get it moved to a dedicated server. The comments section was a deluge of human emotion. Thousands of women shared their own stories of financial abuse, emotional manipulation, and losing themselves in a relationship. "Thank you for giving this a name," one wrote. "My ex did this to me for years, but I just thought he was bad with money. He was controlling me." Another said, "I'm a stay-at-home mum. This is my biggest fear. You've inspired me to open my own bank account tomorrow." Of course there was vitriol. Anonymous accounts, likely Richard sycophants or paid trolls, flooded the comments with accusations. She was a gold digger, a liar, an opportunist trying to extort a rich man. But for every hateful comment, there were 100 messages of support, drowning out the noise with a powerful chorus of solidarity. The mainstream media caught on with a speed that was dizzying. The New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, CNN, Forbes, every major outlet was reporting on it. They couldn't just ignore it. Clara had been too smart. She hadn't made vague accusations. She had provided specific, verifiable details: the doctor's appointment, the public humiliation, the direct quotes. Her story was layered with the kind of authentic detail that is difficult to fabricate and easy to believe. The photo she'd chosen was a stroke of genius. Juxtaposed against the story of a broken, controlled woman, were the images the media outlets pulled from Getty Images, Clara and Richard at Gala's hymn, with his arm possessively around her. Her with a smile that now looked strained and hollow. The contrast was devastating. Somewhere over the Pacific, on a private jet flying back from Asia, Richard Worthington was in the middle of a celebratory champagne toast with his executive team. The Aura pre-launch in Tokyo had been a staggering success. He was on top of the world. When the jet's Wi-Fi connected as they approached US airspace, his phone exploded. It wasn't with messages of congratulations. It was a flood of panicked texts and emails from his chief communications officer, Marcus Thorne. "Urgent. Call me now. We have a 5-alarm fire. Clara. The board is asking for a statement. What the hell is going on?" Richard, annoyed, opened the first link Marcus sent him. It was to Clara's blog post. He read the title, and the blood drained from his face. He read the first paragraph, then the second. The champagne glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the cabin floor. His executives fell silent, watching him. His face, usually a mask of calm authority, was contorted with a mixture of disbelief and pure, undiluted rage. She wouldn't dare. But she had. By the time his jet touched down at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey, Nexus Dynamics stock was already in freefall in after-hours trading. The story wasn't just about a messy divorce anymore. It was about the character and integrity of its CEO. A man who sold a product based on domestic trust was now being publicly accused of domestic tyranny. The irony was not lost on Wall Street. Marcus Thorne was waiting for him on the tarmac, looking like he hadn't slept in a week. "We have to get ahead of this, Richard," he said, skipping any pleasantries. "We need a statement. We need to frame her as unstable, grieving the fact she can't have kids lashing out. She's not unstable, she's a viper." Richard seethed, storming towards his waiting car. "I give her everything, a perfect life, and this is how she repays me." "The world doesn't see it that way right now," Marcus shot back, his voice strained with panic. "Right now, they see a billionaire who cut off his wife's credit card while she was at a fertility clinic. It's a PR nightmare of epic proportions. We have to discredit her now." They crafted a statement that evening, one that would go down in the annals of public relations disasters. It was released exclusively to a friendly journalist at a major business publication. While this is a deeply painful and private family matter, the statement read, "Mr. Worthington is saddened by his wife's latest public outburst. He has always and will continue to support Clara through her emotional and physical challenges. It is his hope that she will seek the help she so clearly needs, and that their privacy will be respected during this difficult time." It was classic gaslighting, and the public saw right through it. The phrase "her emotional and physical challenges" was interpreted as a callous reference to their infertility struggles, a move that backfired spectacularly. Commentators and the public alike labeled it as victim blaming of the highest order. A prominent female senator from California tweeted, "The statement from Richard Worthington's team is a masterclass in how not to respond to allegations of abuse. It's condescending, dismissive, and frankly disgusting. I stand with Clara." The fallout was swift and brutal. The board of Nexus Dynamics, a collection of powerful figures who cared more about shareholder value than their CEO's marital problems, called an emergency meeting. A major pension fund, which held a massive stake in the company, issued a public statement expressing deep concern over the leadership and governance at Nexus. A group of female engineers at Nexus Dynamics anonymously leaked an internal letter to the press detailing a corporate culture that sidelined women, making Clara's story feel like a reflection of a systemic problem. Back in the penthouse, Clara watched it all unfold. She hadn't left. She was staying in the belly of the beast. It was her home, bought with the profits of a company built while she had sacrificed her own life. She wasn't going to be forced out. Isabella was her gatekeeper, fielding the hundreds of emails and calls pouring in. Gloria Allred's office had called. So had the producers of Good Morning America, The Today Show, and 60 Minutes. Clara wasn't ready for that. Not yet. For now, she was watching the man who had tried to silence her be deafened by the roar of a world that was finally listening. He had controlled every aspect of her life for a decade. But in one night, she had seized control of the one thing he valued most, his story. He had made her feel small, invisible, and powerless. But standing there, looking at the news alerts lighting up her phone, Clara Becker Worthington had never felt bigger or more powerful in her entire life. The firestorm was raging, and she was the one who had struck the match. The 24 hours after Richard's disastrous PR statement were a blur of strategy and caffeine. The penthouse, once a symbol of her confinement, had become Clara's fortress. She and Isabella had barely slept, fueled by a potent cocktail of righteous fury, black coffee, and the endless stream of supportive messages that continued to pour in from around the globe. Clara had discovered a strength she didn't know she possessed, a cold, clear-eyed resolve forged in the crucible of public humiliation. She was no longer just the woman who had been wronged. She was the architect of a rebellion. Isabella, in her element, had transformed the minimalist living room into a command center. Her laptop was open to a secure video conference with two of her firm's most ruthless litigators. Stacks of documents were beginning to appear on the marble coffee table. They were methodically planning the legal assault that would accompany the public one. "He's going to come here," Clara said, her voice steady. She stood by the window, watching the morning light glint off the buildings below. She had showered and dressed, not in one of the couture outfits Richard had chosen for her, but in a simple pair of black trousers and a cream-colored silk blouse. It was her own armor. He won't be able to resist a direct confrontation. He needs to re-establish control. "Let him come," Isabella said, a shark's smile playing on her lips. She ended her video call. We're ready for him. The petition for divorce is drafted. We're filing on grounds of irreconcilable differences with a supplementary petition citing extreme cruelty and a pattern of coercive control. And I have a process server on standby 5 minutes from here. Will it be enough? Clara asked, turning from the window. He has an army of lawyers. An army that's busy dealing with the SEC inquiries that are about to pop up thanks to that stock dive, Isabella countered. We're not fighting him on his terms. We're not just arguing about money. We're arguing about conduct. His conduct. It's a different game, and he doesn't know the rules yet. The chime of the private elevator echoed through the penthouse shortly after noon. It was a sound that used to make Clara's stomach clench with anxiety. Today she felt nothing but a grim sense of readiness. The elevator doors opened, and Richard stormed in. He looked like a thundercloud in a bespoke suit. His face was pale, his jaw clenched so tightly a muscle jumped near his temple. His usually perfect hair was slightly askew, as if he'd been running his hands through it in frustration. He wasn't alone. His communications chief, Marcus Thorne, scurried in behind him looking terrified. Richard's cold blue eyes scanned the room and landed on Clara. The sheer force of his rage was a palpable thing. "What have you done?" He snarled, his voice a low growl. He took a step toward her, but stopped when Isabella moved to stand directly at Clara's side. "Don't you dare take another step, Richard," Isabella said, her voice calm and lethally sharp. "This is between my wife and me." He spat, his glare fixed on Clara. "Get out of my home, Isabella. It's her home too, Richard, and I'm her legal counsel." "I'm not going anywhere," Isabella replied smoothly. "Anything you say can and will be documented." Richard ignored her, his eyes boring into Clara's. He tried the tactic that had always worked before, utter dismissive contempt. "Do you have any idea of the damage you've caused to the company? To our life? For what? Because of some petty tantrum over a credit card. You've destroyed everything, you hysterical, ungrateful woman." The old Clara would have flinched. She would have crumpled. The new Clara stood her ground, her gaze unwavering. "I didn't destroy anything." "Richard," she said, her voice devoid of the emotion he expected, "I just described what you had already broken. Your company's stock isn't down because of my blog post. It's down because the world saw the man behind the curtain, and they didn't like what they saw. It turns out that a man who bullies his wife isn't someone people trust to run a multi-billion-dollar company." The directness of her response seemed to momentarily stun him. He had expected tears, apologies, fear. He was met with cold, hard logic. "This is absurd," he stammered, turning to Marcus as if for support, but Marcus was staring at his shoes. "I gave you a perfect life. You gave me a cage," Clara shot back, taking a step forward herself. "A beautiful, expensive cage, but a cage nonetheless. You didn't want a wife. You wanted a living ornament for your perfect life. You wanted an incubator for your perfect heir. You monitored my spending. You isolated me from my friends. You dismissed my feelings, and then you tried to publicly humiliate me to teach me a lesson. The lesson is over, Richard. Class is dismissed." Richard's face contorted with fury. "You will regret this for the rest of your life. Our prenup is ironclad. You signed it. You'll walk away with nothing. I will make sure of it. I'll drag your name through the mud until no one in this city will even look at you." This was the moment Isabella had been waiting for. She held up a hand. "About that prenup, Richard. We should talk." She gestured to the sofa. "Please have a seat." Richard looked as if he'd rather swallow glass. But something in Isabella's tone, a confidence that bordered on predatory, made him hesitate, and then reluctantly, he sat. Marcus hovered nervously behind him. Your prenup has a standard severability clause and a duress clause. Isabella began picking up a document from the table. But my firm believes we can make a compelling case that the entire agreement is voidable. You see, a contract requires a meeting of the minds and good faith from both parties. We will argue that your decade-long pattern of coercive control, culminating in the public act of financial abuse, constitutes a fundamental breach of the marital contract and indicates the prenuptial agreement was signed under fraudulent inducement, that you never intended a partnership, only a controlled acquisition of a spouse. Richard laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. No judge will ever buy that. Won't they? Isabella countered. Public opinion is a powerful thing, Richard, and right now it's not on your side. We have Dr. Hansen's testimony about Clara's chronic stress levels. We have itemized records of you tracking her every purchase. We have dozens of women from your own company who are ready to testify about the toxic, misogynistic culture you fostered. This isn't just a divorce case anymore. It's a referendum on you. We'll subject your entire life, every email, every text, every financial transaction to discovery. Are you sure you want that? The color was draining from Richard's face. He was a man who lived in the shadows of corporate loopholes and NDAs. The idea of total public exposure was his worst nightmare. Just as he was about to retort, Isabella's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and her expression changed. A flicker of genuine surprise, followed by a slow, triumphant smile. "Excuse me for one moment," she said. She answered the phone, turning away slightly. "Daniel, what a pleasure to hear from you." Yes, I can see how that would be relevant. That's fascinating. In a series of offshore accounts, you say, to avoid. Yes, of course. I would very much like to see that documentation. My email is... Thank you, Daniel. I'll be in touch. She hung up and turned back to Richard. The air in the room had shifted. Clara could feel it. Richard felt it too. He looked wary, like an animal that has just scented a new unknown predator. "Who was that?" he demanded. "Just an old friend," Isabella said casually. "Daniel Petrov. You remember him, don't you, your former CFO? The one you fired 5 years ago, when he started asking too many questions about your executive bonus structures. He seems to think you've been systematically hiding marital assets in a series of shell corporations based in the Cayman Islands, assets that you failed to disclose during the signing of your ironclad prenup. That Richard isn't just grounds for voiding a contract. That's fraud, and I believe the SEC and the IRS will be very, very interested in Daniel's documentation. It was a kill shot. The final devastating blow." Richard Worthington, the master architect, had been completely outmaneuvered. His face was a mask of pure shock, followed by the dawning horror of total ruin. He had been so focused on Clara, on the domestic battle, that he had forgotten about the corporate skeletons in his closet. He stared at Clara, a new, desperate look in his eyes. The rage was gone, replaced by a raw, pleading panic. "Clara, we can fix this. You and I. We can... I'll give you whatever you want. A new card. A separate allowance. Just call this off. Retract the story. Tell them you were distraught. It was the plea of a defeated man. Not a plea for forgiveness, but a plea for survival." He wasn't seeing her, his wife. He was seeing the woman who held the power to destroy him utterly. Clara looked at him, at the shell of the titan who had dominated her life for a decade, and felt not pity, but a profound sense of release. "No, Richard," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "There's nothing to fix. This was never about the money." She glanced at Isabella, who gave a nearly imperceptible nod. As if on cue, there was a polite knock on the penthouse door. Isabella walked over and opened it to reveal a nondescript man in a suit holding a legal envelope. "Richard Worthington?" the man asked politely. Richard just stared, mute. "He is Isabella, confirmed." The man stepped forward and held out the envelope. "You've been served." He placed the envelope on the marble coffee table in front of Richard, turned and left. The heavy door clicked shut, sealing the silence in the room. The divorce papers sat there, a white flag of surrender on a battlefield Clara had just conquered. Richard didn't even look at them. He just stared at Clara, his empire crumbling around him in the silent, fig-scented air. Later that evening, after Richard and a shell-shocked Marcus Thorne had departed, Isabella's phone rang again. It was a producer from Anderson Cooper 360. "They want you, Clara," Isabella said, covering the mouthpiece. "Prime time, no questions off limits. This is it. This is your chance to tell the whole world in your own voice." Clara looked out the window at the city, no longer a tapestry, but a real place full of real people, real struggles, and real hope. The blog post was the first shot. The confrontation was winning the battle. This interview would be winning the war. "Tell them yes," Clara said afamala, eye in her eyes that no one could ever extinguish again. "I'm ready." In the end, Clara's story did more than just break the internet. It broke the silence. It became a cultural touchstone, a reference point for a conversation that society was desperate to have about the hidden nature of coercive control and emotional abuse. Her single blog post launched 1,000 others, empowering countless individuals to speak their own truths. Richard Worthington was forced to step down as CEO, his carefully constructed legacy shattered by the one person he thought he had under complete control. Clara, with the support of a world she never knew she had fought for, and won a divorce settlement that was not just about money, but about justice. She used a portion of it to create the Gilded Frame Foundation, an organization dedicated to helping victims of domestic financial abuse reclaim their independence. Her story wasn't just a fleeting viral moment, it became a movement. If Clara's journey from a silent victim to a powerful voice resonated with you, please share this video. You truly never know who is out there feeling alone in their own gilded cage, needing to hear that they have the power to break free. Like this video, subscribe to the channel for more stories that matter, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Your share could be the key that unlocks someone else's door.